Hello and welcome to today's video. These are my best books of 2023. I have a top 10 list. There are a few like little caveats here and there, a few things that make it maybe a bit more than 10, but I do have a definitive 10. However, one for definite, maybe two, where it's like, even though I'm mentioning the one book, it could apply to the whole series. And there's also one special mention that I'll do at the start as well. But yeah, I do have a definitive top 10. I will tell you the ones where I feel like the whole series could be in it rather than just the one, but I have limited to one book per series, but also one book per author, so there's no repeats like that or anything. And yeah, I don't think there's much else to say. If you've never been here before, I read a lot of fantasy, a lot of sci-fi, a lot of graphic novels, and a lot of, well, I've been dabbling in poetry in 2023, let's put it that way. But it's not yet a big enough proportion for me to include it in my like a lot of, but I've been dabbling. And that leads us straight away into our special mention. So I did just want to mention this. This is The Perseverance by Raymond Antrobus, and basically this is a poetry collection that was just absolutely amazing. Like I think it was the best poetry collection I read during 2023. I'd have to reread the best poetry collection I read in 2022 to see how I feel the two compared to each other, but like there's a good chance it's the best poetry collection I've ever read. But if not, then it'd be coming second to 2022's. But yeah, this is, well, I'll just read you the back of it. The Perseverance is a remarkable debut by British-Jamaican poet Raymond Antrobus. Ranging across history and continents, these poems operate in the spaces in between. Their haunting lyrics create new hybrid territories. The Perseverance is a book of loss, contested language and praise, where eulogies for the poet's father sit alongside meditations for the D/death experience. So yeah, the author is deaf, and I believe it says somewhere went to like a few different schools for the deaf, maybe. I don't know, I can't find that right now, but yeah, it was just so good. It spoke so much about so many different things. Okay, well this was one that I found amazing, and I will put it on the screen, but you'll see from this poem alone that the sign language is also included. So this does use BSL, which is British Sign Language, I believe. I'm pretty sure there are a few mentions of things happening in America, but I do believe that that does also use BSL because the author is British Jamaican, so I believe that BSL is used throughout. I believe there's no ASL, but I could be wrong, like my sign language knowledge is limited. But yeah, this is potentially one of the poems that stood out to me the most, or at least the one that I've told the most people about, and this is called Two Guns in the Sky for Daniel Harris. Well, I've had it on the screen, but it's essentially talking about the police and how little the police are aware. Yeah, I don't feel like I can summarise the poem. It was just amazing, and there's so many that hit me as hard as this one. So yeah, I just wanted to mention it. I don't feel like I've read enough poetry yet to be able to like properly include it in like my best books of the year, because I'm still learning what I like. I still don't read much. Like I think I read 12 poetry collections in 2023, so like it's not that much, but I'm learning what I like, and I definitely like this, so I did just want to give it a mention at the start. And then we are into the top 10. What I'm basically going to be doing is I'm going to tell you the book, and any of these books that are in videos I'll link up above, but actually a lot of these weren't this year. But what I'm essentially going to tell you is the very basics of the book, maybe a couple of tropes, and then why you might like it, because I feel like I always watch these best of videos, obviously excited to learn what people's best books were, but also looking for books for myself that I might enjoy. Like if this is someone's best book, there's a chance you could enjoy it. So I'm just going to get into it. At the number 10 spot we have Bingo Love. This is the jackpot edition. There is an alternative cover, I'll put it here, it's just not got a little bit of extra content at the end. But this is a very lovely graphic novel about two grandmas who get to fall in love. On the back, the very short of it is, take a trip through time with Hazel Johnson and Marie McRae as they fall in love at church bingo in 1963 break up because of pressure from their families and reunite nearly 50 years later. And it was such a lovely, wholesome little graphic novel, but it also had a lot of like big issues in, and a lot of things that I wouldn't call them plot twists, they were just life, but like a lot of things I was like, oh shit, like I didn't not realise that was what was going on. And yeah, it really impacted me. I read this right at the start of the year and I thought about it for months and months and months, and for that reason I couldn't not give it a spot on the top 10. If you enjoy graphic novels, if you enjoy contemporary, if you enjoy just like gay love stories, and if this art style appeals to you, then I'd say give it a go. In the number 9 spot, I have put a book in that is breaking my rules, my personal rules, that I don't include rereads in these best books of, because if I'm rereading it I already know I enjoy it. But I haven't read this book since I was like a kid. I can't tell you what age, but I would guess 14. For a very long time it was the only book that had ever made me cry, and it is still to this day the only book that has ever made me bawl, and that is The Travelling Cat Chronicles. Oh my gosh. It's so good. We are going on this road trip with our cat Nana and Nana's owner, and we see all of this road trip, all of this journey through Nana's perspective, and we're really just learning a lot about what's going on. I don't want to say too much, I don't want to potentially spoil it. Essentially, we're on this road trip with Nana, and then it says, set against the backdrop of Japan's changing seasons and narrated with the rare gentleness and striking humour, Nana's story explores the wonder and thrill of life's unexpected detours. It is about friendship, solitude, and knowing when to give and when to take. Above all, it shows how acts of love, both great and small, can transform our lives. I can't recommend this enough. I don't read that much contemporary, and honestly I don't read as much translated fiction as I'd like, but this, if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend. I would have some tissues ready when you get into those end sections. But yeah, it is such a lovely story, and seeing it through the perspective of Nana's eyes and realising things as Nana realises things, and meeting these people, and not only meeting these people, but because Nana's a cat, like we're also meeting other animals and being able to understand them. It is a lovely time, and I couldn't recommend it more. Then in the number 8 spot we have Fina. This is a comedy sci-fi. Yeah, I don't really know how to describe it, but essentially we've got 2 minimum wage employees who used to date, and they are both still working in an IKEA-like store. It is a furniture store, very much like IKEA. It's described very much to be like IKEA. And one day, whilst they're on shift, a wormhole opens and a grandma customer goes through the wormhole. And turns out, as part of the job, it is these 2 minimum wage employees' job to go through this wormhole and go in search of this grandma and learn all about these wormholes that apparently just open up in these stores. It's very short, it's a little novella, but it was so funny, like it actually made me laugh. There were so many twists and turns that I just did not expect. So bingeable, so fun. I would highly recommend, and I just don't see that many people talk about it, so I would really recommend it. I gave this, I believe, 5 stars, maybe 4.5. All of these books, if I didn't give them 5 stars, I should have, because I've still thought about them all these months later after reading them. But either way, a 5-star book for me. Bear in mind, I gave Horror Store by Grady Hendrix 3.5 stars, something like that. If you enjoyed Horror Store, which I think is a much more popular book, then I 100% think that you would enjoy this. And I think it's quite a good way to describe what you might be getting in for. But I feel like this is just very fun and very character focused and very interesting. So yeah, would highly recommend. In the number 7 spot, we have Every Heart a Doorway. Oh my gosh, this is the first book in the Wayward Children series. I am now up to date on the Wayward Children series, so although book 9 is coming out within the next 2 weeks, I think. So very exciting. This is one of them where, like, I 100% think that book 1 is the book that should be on this list, but I do feel like the series as a whole I would 100% recommend, and if I included more than 1 book per series on my list, like, others very well could have like taken spots. So yeah, this Every Heart a Doorway, essentially when children are going through these doorways, like in Narnia, like in Alice in Wonderland, like all these different stories, the story always ends when they come back to the real world. And these books explore, well, what if that door they went through took them to their perfect world, and now they're back in the real world and they're having to deal with that. Book 1 in the story takes place at Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, which is a home set up to help these children once they do come back, and it is children who've gone through all different doorways to all different worlds, and have found worlds that are perfect for them and are no longer in them. It's very interesting, so much to think about. Book 1 also has a bit of a like mystery plotline in there as well, and some of the books in the series take place in Eleanor West Home or in like the more present day setting, and then some of the books in the series do take place in these weird and wonderful worlds. I'd highly recommend it. I would say book 1 is almost definitely magical realism, like that's its top genre, but I would say the further and further into the series you get, I feel like some are more magical realism, some are more fantasy. So magical realism, fantasy, if you enjoy that, I would recommend it. And this is actually a YA book, so I feel like it's good for a lot of people, for a lot of different ages. Personally, I'm an adult, I read it, I mainly read adult books now, and it was still just as amazing as has made this, so could not recommend it more. I don't really know what to compare it to or recommend it to, but if that sounds good to you, just following these magical doorways, following these lives as they are coming back, then I would say go for it. The very first paragraph here is: children have always disappeared under the right conditions, slipping through the shadows under a bed or at the back of the wardrobe, tumbling down rabbit holes or into old wells, and emerging somewhere else. It's so fun, so good. Highly recommend. I feel like I'm saying highly recommend for so many, but like these are my top 10, of course I do. In the number 6 spot we have Airy. This is book 1 in the Broken Wings duet. I would say it is a fantasy romance, but I would say it's a very slow book. It's a lot of character building. We see a lot of things, and relationships and friendships just develop very slowly, and we really learn a lot about our characters, and it's more about them introspecting themselves and meeting these small group of people. So we have our 2 main characters, and one main character has recently been sent to be the warden of this high up prison that no one really knows much about, and they are sent here as punishment for something that they did whilst being a knight of the realm. And our other main character is actually the prisoner of this prison, and we find out the only prisoner being kept in this prison. It's a very interesting story. There is lots to it, and I would also say it has a lot of interesting characters. Well, not a lot, I would say like 2 for definite, maybe 3 depending on how you count the like secondary characters, but definitely 2 secondary characters who are very interesting, and I'd love for in the future to have some stories like about them and their travels and their perspectives too. But yeah, I still need to finish this series. I haven't finished it, but book 1 of the duet, so half of the series, absolutely amazing. Would highly recommend. I would say if you like slower paced fantasy romance, if you just like, I mean there's a lot going on, there is a lot of plot. I wouldn't call it cozy necessarily, but I would just say it is a very lovely fantasy romance to read. So yeah, would highly recommend. Then speaking of cozy fantasy, in the 5th spot we have Legends and Lattes. This was a book that I read within the first couple of months of the year, and I just could not put it down. It was absolutely lovely. It is cozy, it is low stakes. Every time a difficulty comes up, there is a lovely resolution. I would say this very much reminds me of like fantasy graphic novels, like that sort of stake level. Like there are things that are going to be come up, but the way that they're going to be solved is just very chill and cozy. And we have our main character, Viv, the orc barbarian, who wants to lay down her sword and open a little coffee shop, but no one in the town of Foon has ever heard of coffee. I don't really think I need to tell you much about this because it is such a big book. Like, I was late to the party. It was big last year, well 2 years ago, so it was big in 2022 because so many people loved it. I picked it up in 2023, and yeah, if you haven't picked it up and you think you could enjoy the cozy fantasy vibes, I would highly recommend. It was great. Then a very exciting little fact that I've only just realised myself. At the time of me reading my top 4 books, all of them were self-published. Now, one of them has got picked up by a traditional publisher, and that is why I cannot get my own physical copy because I'm having to wait for paperbacks to come out. But of the top 4, they were all self-published at the time I read them. One's got picked up, and the other 3 are just still self-published and still very widely available. So let's go through them. The 4th spot, just missing out on top 3, is Prince of the Ancients. Oh my gosh, how do I even describe this? So we have Draco, who is the heir to the Dragon Kingdom, and we also have Eli, who we meet at the start of this story. She is part of the human lands. The dragons are not allowed to go to the human lands, and whilst in these human lands, Draco and Eli meet, and Draco cannot like expose himself. He cannot let on that he's a dragon. He can't let the dragon win, he can't let the dragon be freed. And we are solving the mystery of these different attacks that have been happening all over the land. There have been attacks on villages, a lot of villages kind of like bordering the part of the land that's been split off for the dragons, where they are kind of like exiled to. And it's very, very interesting. There's so many twists and turns, and yeah, I mean, I have now read book 2. I think I enjoyed book 2 equally as much probably, but book 1 just really got me into this series and really got me there. It's marketed as fantasy romance. I would say don't really expect much of the romance. It is very plot heavy, and it's kind of just more like pining in this book. Like, we do kind of see a little bit, but like it's very slow. You know, our two main characters obviously both like each other, but they both have a lot of secrets, they both have a lot of things to get over, and everything that is tackled in this book, oh gosh, I haven't mentioned this yet, please check trigger warnings for all of the books. These top 4 are probably more relevant to do that for, but even the ones previous, check trigger warnings, look after yourself. But especially these top 4, this one and the other 3 I still need to talk about. Check, look after yourself, be careful. But yeah, our main characters have been through a lot, and we have to deal with that, we have to go through that, and we have to come out the other side. So I would highly recommend, if you like dragons, dragon shifters, and want this dragon human fantasy romance with a lot of plot and a lot of other characters and a lot of other magical folk, then give it a go. Then number 3 is the one that I can't currently get my hands on, and that is Serpent and the Wings of Night. I read this on the Kindle. It has since been picked up by a traditional publisher. I have got my pre-order in for the paperback, but it doesn't come out till the middle of next year. You can still read it on the Kindle though, and I believe that the hardback of this book is now out, I believe. So you can still access it, but just not if you want it in paperback right now. But yeah, this is Serpent and the Wings of Night. It is a kind of fantasy romance. I think all of these top ones are fantasy romances, and I think what you'll notice if you read them or have read any, they're fantasy romances, but they could still stand and be really good books if the romance was taken out. I am a fantasy person, and it's taken a lot of reading this year, it's taken a lot of tests and a lot of bad books, but I've kind of figured out like the type of fantasy romance that I like, and there is like a line of how much plot I need. And I think I've realised, like, if you took the romance out, these books would still stand and still have plot and still have enough to carry them, but the romance is a nice addition. So that's kind of how I describe them, and that is exactly how I'd describe Serpent and the Wings of Night, but maybe less so than the others, because especially this first book, it is a trial situation, and we kind of, if it wasn't for our 2 main characters getting to know each other, maybe we wouldn't have a second book. Let's put it like that. So yeah, I really like this one. It is trials, it is vampires and humans, and our main character that we follow is a human going to these trials to win the games, and there's different trials to go through. There's a lot going on. You can make teams, you can build up, but they're all also living together in between these trials. It's a very good book, very interesting. I would say it's a very quick, easy one to read, but it has stayed with me, and I have really been thinking about it and wanting to reread it. So I definitely feel like it's a decent book to give a try. And I'd say if as a like teenager you enjoyed, like, well, if you're a teenager in the same age as me and you were reading like Hunger Games, Maze Runner, Divergent, this is kind of like the adult version of that, I'd say. So yeah, if that sounds good, go for it. Then spot number 2, the 5th book in a series, although this is another one where the whole series could be here, but like when deciding on the book, like it had to be the 5th one because the 5th is the final one, and everything just comes together so good. The 5th book in the series is called Lady of Starfire. This is the 5th and final book in the Lady of Darkness series, and this is my favourite series of the year. 100% hands down my favourite series of the year. If I was just rating it on like books that I've read a whole series of, this is the top. It's amazing. I want to reread it again soon, and that will be my 3rd read of it. I've read it once on the Kindle. I've read the first 3 books another time as audio, because the audiobooks for those are out and the others are coming out shortly. And I just really, yeah, after I started my reread, I just knew I needed my own physical copies, and I needed to sit down and be able to like binge and devour this as much as I like to devour a lot of my books, and really like read through it and write in it and make pretty notes and make annotations and just make these books mine. This is absolutely amazing. In book 1 of this series, Lady of Darkness, we meet our main character, and she is acting like a noble lady, but she's not. She's actually an assassin, and our other main character, love interest, is training this noble lady, but he does not know that she is not a noble lady. And we really learn a lot, we see a lot. The story very much just starts off as kind of like a revenge story, and throughout these books it turns into so much more. I would truly say, like, as a young adult, as a teenager, if you enjoyed Throne of Glass, the kind of like assassin aspect is very similar in these books. Like, we very much follow like a similar sort of main character, but maybe a main character that's a bit better at dealing with their trauma and a bit better at working through things and willing to work through things, and we actually see them work through that stuff. It's not just magically instant. And I would also say it's similar to that series in the way, if you read that series, you know, you start off and you think you're aiming for one story, and by the time you get to the end of it, it's a completely different story and way more things going on. I'd say it's very much like that in that aspect. I would also say, if you've read Graceling or the Graceling Realm series at all, the type of romance in these books is very similar to that, where it is just these two people who want to be there for each other and these two people who are drawn to each other. And it's a nice romance. Like, a lot of these books, sometimes things happen and you're like, oh, okay, not great, but this just didn't feel like that. I mean, there were probably the odd moment. Like, I feel like our main two characters are both quite headstrong, they both have different opinions, but yeah, throughout the book so much happens. I can't even talk about it. My favourite parts of this series would be spoilers. I am thinking of making a reading vlog out of my reread of this series. If you would like to see that, please do let me know in the comments. But yeah, this is my favourite series of 2023, and I don't know what to say about it, and that makes me a crap person trying to do this, trying to recommend this series to you. But I don't know what to say. Read it. That's all I really can say. I keep thinking like, oh, I could compare it to this book, I could compare it to this book, but like, I don't feel like that's even setting it enough. This is amazing. I could not recommend it more. And then our number one spot. This is also a series, so might be shocking that it's not my favourite series of the year, but only book 1 is out in this series. No other books are out. Book 1, absolutely amazing, and I read it and I devoured it, and I will read it again definitely, but none of the other books are out. So right now this is just my favourite book of the year, because I have to take that series out of it because I haven't read the rest of the series. So my favourite book of the year goes to The Crown of Oaths and Curses. This is the first book in the Mortal Fates. Where do I even start with this one? Another fantasy romance, another like trope, but this book turns all the tropes on its head. This is fated mates. They actually hate each other. Like, it's fated mates and it's enemies to lovers, but also like, I would say there's basic, you know, romance in this first book. Like, I definitely think that's where we're going. Like, on the back of the book it tells you they're fated mates. Like, we know that's where it has to go, surely. But that doesn't really happen. This is so much plot, so much character development, so many different things, and it's so interesting. It sucked me in straight away. It's dual point of view, so we do see both of our main characters and we follow them both, and oh my gosh, it's so interesting to do that, because there's things that we know about each of them that the other one doesn't know about each other, and there's moments where both of them frustrated me, especially our male main character. Oh my gosh, some of the things, it's like, oh, just go talk, but like, it's not in like a arseholey miscommunication way that a lot of like contemporary romance books do. It's literally just like, these two people hate each other, like they're actual enemies. So our male main character is a fae, our female main character is a witch, and the fae and the witches have been at war. They don't coexist at all. There is a lot going on, and we learn more about witches and you know, the witch divides and all this stuff from our female main character. We learn a bit about the fae from our male, and there's also so many great supporting characters, so many different characters who have different takes, different perspectives. We see so much growth in each of them, and yeah, I don't think I can say anything more without spoiling it. We really don't learn that much off the back. I will say that even from the back of this book, we know that our female main character, like what she thinks her destiny is is to help the prince to defeat his enemies. No, I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to say anything, but let's just say this is amazing. I don't know what to recommend it to. I don't know what to say. This book did tropes how I've never read them before. Maybe there's more out there that turn tropes on the head. If there are, leave them in the comments. Like, if you have books that like do these like fantasy romance tropes and turn them on their head and like make them a completely different thing, please let me know them in the comments, because this one was bloody amazing and I cannot recommend it more. Like, please go read it. It's amazing. But those are all of my top 10 books plus an honourable mention for 2023. Oh, I don't know what to say. I feel so happy, like, having just spoke about all the books that I've loved this year. Well, this isn't even all of them. Like, I did decide to limit myself to a top 10, and I'm glad that I did, because it was relatively easy to choose, but there's so many others that I could have done. Like, I could have done a whole 10 more probably of just books that I found amazing, especially if I hadn't done my rule of like one book per author / per series. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what your favourite books are. If you have any favourite books that overlap with my favourite books, I don't know. Have you found any favourite books of all time in 2023? I think I probably have. I don't want to speak too soon, but I really feel like some of these have made like the favourites of all time. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed the video. I really hope to hear about your favourite books in the comments down below. Please do give the video a like if you liked it. Subscribe down below if you'd like to see more content like this, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye!